in Genesis chapter 3 called the curse that fell upon a woman. Now, whenever I bring this up, I get hate mail. And the reason I get hate mail is because our society, through feminist ideology, is basically told women that you're never the problem, you're never the issue, it's everything else. And what that does is that robs you of your agency. That robs you of your capacity to make a free will choice. It robs and steals from you the ability to discover who you really are and experience true value in your own life. Okay? And that's why feminism is so destructive. It not only destroys your relationships and your capacity for long-term intimate relationships, it destroys your capacity to discover, live, and walk in the fullness of your value. Okay? And so we're going to dig into that. We're going to dig into toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is this notion that masculine attributes of males are toxic. And this has become a real big thing. Recently, though, it's starting to get a bad name because everybody's realizing how toxic the idea of toxic masculinity really is. We're going to dig into that. Another thing. Welcome, everyone, to the Salty Pastor Podcast. I am Douglas Peak, and I am your humble, salty pastor. And on today, I'm wearing my salty shirt, so we're going to dig in and do a lot of in-depth saltiness today. We are going to take the lid off the salt shaker and just dump it out there. So I hope you find it beneficial. We're in this brand new series talking about ideologies, all right? And this is really getting to the nuts and bolts about the Salty Pastor ethos. The Salty Pastor Podcast is for people who believe that fluff is not enough. They know that if they have a little issue in their life, they can go out real quickly and find 10 steps, practical steps to make an adjustment. What the Salty Pastor Podcast, the Salty Pastor universe, is all about is people who are just average people who want to think for themselves. They want to go through the process of discovering their own answers. And what they are is they're tired of the elites, they're tired of academics, they're tired of leaders, they're tired of so-called scholars who tell them that they can't think for themselves, that they're not capable of making up their own mind. Well, the Salty Pastor is here for that very purpose, is to help you think for yourself, know what you believe and why you believe it, because that's the key to living the type of life and experiencing the life that you were meant to experience. And so really this is all about how to live life well. And one of the first things you have to do is learn to think for yourself, make your own decisions, and how your beliefs are formed, because what you believe is one of the most important things about you. So I'm glad you're joining the Salty Pastor Podcast. And this entire series is going to be really a deep dive on the whole ethos of the Salty Pastor universe. And it's all about what you can do in a way of thinking that will grow your faith. The reason I'm doing this is simply because I want to help you. I really don't have a dog in this hunt anymore. I was a full-time pastor for 37, 38, 39 years. I was at one church for 29 years, and I'm now retired from all of that. So I'm just doing this to help people. And it's not connected to a church. It's not connected to any other thing. It's just a standalone podcast. We hope to be able to offer more things to help you grow in your faith over time. Now, let's get deep or specific about this whole series called Ideologies. And my title is basically Ideologies are the problem, people are not the problem. And I think you're going to kind of understand why that's an important distinction. So let's ground it in everyday life, okay? Why is this such an important series? And why does it matter to you? Well, first and foremost, some of the biggest issues that we are facing as a people and the issues that you may be facing in your own life or the lives of the people that you love the most, things that they're facing, are a result of ideologies. Ideologies seeded into the cultural conscience at some point in the past. So what's interesting is everything we're experiencing today is in the context or the framework of a way of thinking that was seeded into our culture 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 80 years ago, maybe 100 years ago. And so it's really critical to understand where these things come from in order for us to navigate them accurately today. For instance, one of the biggest concerns I hear today among women who are over 35 and single is they cannot find a man who wants to date and have a committed, serious relationship, right? Now, they're like, why is it so difficult? At first, they would say, oh, I just thought, I was like in the wrong fishing pond, or, men are just this way. But over time, it's like, why is it that it seems that the pool of dateable men who want a serious relationship is so small? Well, the reason why is because of an ideology that was seeded into our culture 50, 60 years ago. Why are younger men today struggling with their identity of manhood and what does it mean to be a man? And why are they more disinterested in marriage than ever before? The largest percent of young men today, since they've been tracking data, are disinterested in marriage. They feel like it's not a net benefit for them anymore. Why is that happening? Well, because of an ideology seeded into the cultural conscience 70, 80 years ago. Why does Gen Z, this younger generation, everybody who's under 30, believe that the American dream is no longer possible for them? Well, it's because of an ideology seeded into our culture 25, 30 years ago. How come the political divide in our country is the size of the Grand Canyon? It's like we've forgotten that we're all living in the same country, but it is so wide. Why? Well, because of an ideology seeded into the cultural conscience in the past. Why are schools, universities, hospitals, clinics pushing the transgendered agenda like never before? Why has that become such a big deal? Well, because of an ideology that was seeded into our culture. Why is it that if you're a new parent, and you're going to make educational decisions, the fear that your kid will be indoctrinated instead of educated is a real fear? I mean, that is a huge concern. What has happened to our educational system? Why is it that we have quadrupled the spending on public education in the last 20 years and the outcomes have actually gone down? Why? Well, because of an ideology that was seeded into our culture. We are going to talk about things that are not like 10 steps to figure out how to date somebody or 5 things you got to do to pick a good school. Those are great questions. Those are great practical things. What I want to do is I want you to know why these things are happening and where they come from. Because then you can formulate your own beliefs about them and your own sense of, okay, this is what's true and this is what's false. Because there's no possible way for you to experience a really authentic, deep, meaningful life if you don't know what you believe and why you believe it. I've quoted this before. Carl Jung, the great, one of the fathers of psychology, he said that the primary source of unhappiness is behaving in a way that's incongruent with your core beliefs. And so what happens is a lot of times we act incongruent from our core beliefs simply because we don't know what our core beliefs are. Now, once you know them, then you can change them, you can clarify them, you can grow them, you can mature them. And that makes all the difference in the downstream effect in your life. So all of these problems we have, our lack of clear beliefs, our misunderstanding of how to date, how to fall in love and stay in love, how to raise kids, what's wrong with our school systems, why our politics are so divided, why people are bailing on marriage like never before, why our economy is doing what it's doing, are all a result of ideologies. And what I mean by that is I really want to define ideology for you. I want you to know what it is. An ideology is a framework of thinking. This is what I always talk about. Sometimes it's how you think. The framework in which you think about things is just as or more important than what you think, the conclusions you come to. Because if you start with the wrong framework, you always come to the wrong conclusion, okay? Jordan Peterson wrote a book about this called Maps of Meaning. And what he does in this book, it's not his most popular book, but it was his first book, is that he talks about, based on what we know about how the brain works, and based upon archetypal stories and myths and all these types of things, we have to understand that those two things come together to create a framework of thinking that gives people meaning. So until you understand your framework and how you think, it's really difficult to experience meaning and purpose in your life. And this is why Christianity has been so popular for 2,000 years. The reason why is because it's a shortcut to a framework of thinking. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to have all of the conclusions. You don't have to have all the critical thinking skills. You don't have to be trained in logic or rhetoric or any of that kind of stuff. You can just read it, simply apply it to your life, and it creates a framework of thinking in your mind because it's a thing that is reality. And then what it does is it produces in your life meaning and purpose, okay? Now, how does that work? Well, let's go back to what we introduced on Tuesday in this podcast, and that is this. What is the nature of the gospel? Well, the nature of the gospel of Jesus Christ is a truth claim. Now, it's not just any truth claim. It's not a truth claim like, I understand gravity and how it works. It's not a truth claim like if you take an antibiotic for this, it's going to get rid of this bacterial infection. Those can be facts. You can accept facts or not facts. The truth claim of the gospel is a claim about reality. It is a framework claim, okay? That's what it is. In philosophy, they call this metaphysics. Now, when you read about philosophy, you basically realize there's metaphysics, epistemology, ontology, and a bunch of other different things. And that's just basically a categorization to help you work through it more easily. And what it is that, well, metaphysics is simply the category that examines the basic structure of reality. It's like, well, how do we know we exist? And if you remember, Descartes launched a revolution in thinking when he said, I think, therefore I am. So he was making a framework claim about reality. And that's how we know we exist, okay? So that kind of stuff. The real question then becomes this, is that if Christianity is a claim about reality, what reality does it claim? Well, it claims that there is a God and that you are separated from this God. This God created all reality, and he emptied himself, came in form of the bondservant. We often call this the Son of God, Jesus, in order to reconcile you back to God. So that's the basic truth claim of the gospel, and it is a frame of reference. That's why the question, if there is a God, is such an important question. The most important question I think that anybody asks themselves is, well, is there or is there not a God? Now, what's interesting about this, I just want you to know, the Salty Pastor is designed for the average Joe. You don't need to be a philosopher, a theologian, or scholar in order to master any of these basic concepts. As a matter of fact, this is one of the problems with higher education, and this is one of the problems, I would call it a problematic ideology. This problematic ideology is the notion of education and its elitist nature. And that is the notion that a normal, everyday people can't think for themselves. You know, we have to have experts, people with lots of letters after their name, degrees, in order to figure out the answers for us and then tell us what to do. Now, the salty pastor hates this belief. It is a horrible belief. It is a controlling belief. It is an elitist, arrogant, prideful belief that robs people of their agency and steals from them the capacity to live a meaningful, purposeful, fulfilled, self-directed life. G.K. Chesterton talks about this often, and he says that the collective thought of the average man is more powerful than the elitist thinking could ever be. And it's kind of the illustration, I brought this up before, is you could take 10 guys with IQ of 180 each, right? So you've got, wow, this is 1,800 IQ points trying to figure out a problem. And then you take 100,000 people that live in a town and with an average IQ of 100. Well, that IQ power in the 100,000 people is going to achieve more than those 10 IQ guys in, a room by themselves. Now, on occasion, do you need one researcher to focus and make a breakthrough? Yeah, but that doesn't mean that that person can tell these 10,000 how to do it. I mean, the whole COVID thing is a perfect example on this. And the one thing I want to zero in on is the entire politicization of science based around the drug ivermectin and its power. And it was so interesting to me to see how ivermectin became a political football. Why? How in the world does that happen? Well, it's because of an ideology. And it's this ideology of educational elitism. And these people who were elites said that, well, we want people to do this and we don't want them to consider something else. And so we're just going to basically lie about it. I mean, Dr. Fauci has admitted to this, particularly in the issue of wearing masks. He's admitted to this, that he lied in numerous separate times about it and that he had an intent for the greater good. Well, this is crazy. This is crazy talk. And so that's why you have to learn to think for yourself and make your own decisions, because a salty pastor hates this notion that you have to be an elite in order to figure out life. You do not. You just need to be an average person who says, I'm smart enough to think for myself. Doesn't matter what your IQ is. What matters is the effort, okay? So what I want to do is I want to spend the rest of my time on introducing you some ideologies that we're going to talk about over the next, few weeks, 10 weeks. Maybe we'll take a break for Christmas, and then we'll jump right back into it in the new year. But these are ideologies that you may or may not have heard of, but they have a huge impact on you as a person in today's world, in the framework of how you think, okay? Number one is every single person has been influenced by postmodern philosophy. This is an ideology that rejects any authentic or meta narrative. Now, what in the world does that mean? Well, basically what they say is there is no objective truth. So it allows even Christians to believe something is true simply because they want to believe it is true. This is what destroys communities, it destroys families, it destroys marriages, it destroys churches, it destroys businesses, it destroys companies. What it does is, instead of allowing people to be open-minded, gracious, and transcendent, transcendence is the capacity to say, yeah, okay, I don't see it this way, but I can see how you would see it that way. So maybe we ought to just agree to disagree, which is called tolerance. Postmodernism steals all of that. It steals it all away. What it says is, well, your truth is your truth, and your truth is so powerful, it has the right to overwhelm everybody else's truth. And that's why this ideology has been so destructive. And what it does is it stops married couples from coming together, right? It stops families from coming together. It stops companies from being in unity. It undermines sports teams and their capacity to win. It undermines churches. It undermines communities, school districts. The list goes on and on and on. All because people don't understand the framework, the frame of reference that they have when they come to solve a conflict. And that's due to postmodernism. So we're going to dig into that and why it's so destructive. Number 2 is deconstructionism. Deconstructionism is the notion that if you break something down into its pieces and parts, like I'm going to deconstruct it into its basic parts, and if I can find a flaw, then that means the whole thing is false. Okay, so that's basically what deconstructionism is. What deconstructionism is a boon to perfectionists or wannabe perfectionists. And that is people who expect perfection out of the people around them, people who expect perfection from their communities, their government, their company, their business, their manager. They expect perfection from their spouse. They expect perfection from their kids, right? But they don't have any of that expectation of themselves. Right. So what they do, and this is a result of deconstructionism, what they do is they judge everybody harshly, and then they give themselves grace and mercy for all their flaws and wonder why other people aren't giving them grace. And what deconstructionism has done is it has become incredibly divisive, right? It's incredibly divisive. We're going to dig into why that is such a destructive ideology. The next ideology that we're going to dig into is going to be very controversial, and that is feminism. Feminism is an ideology, particularly third wave feminism. And most women today do not understand. If you are under 50 years of age and you ever went to university, you went to a community college, you went to a high school, a public high school, or a private high school, you went to any educational system, then you have been tainted with the ideology of feminism. It is rampant in any and all media outlets, movies, sitcoms, comedians, music. The music industry is rife with feminist ideology. And so what happens is, whether you know it or not, ladies, this has tainted you. The problem with feminism is that what it does is it appeals to what Moses wrote in Genesis chapter 3 called the curse that fell upon a woman. Now, whenever I bring this up, I get hate mail. And the reason I get hate mail is because our society, through feminist ideology, is basically told women that you're never the problem, you're never the issue, it's everything else. And what that does is that robs you of your agency. That robs you of your capacity to make a free will choice. It robs and steals from you the ability to discover who you really are and experience true value in your own life. Okay. And that's why feminism is so destructive. It not only destroys your relationships and your capacity for long-term intimate relationships, it destroys your capacity to discover, live, and walk in the fullness of your value. Okay. And so we're going to dig into that. We're going to dig into toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is this notion that masculine attributes of males are toxic. And this has become a real big thing. Recently, though, it's starting to get a bad name because everybody's realizing how toxic the idea of toxic masculinity really is. We're going to dig into that. Another thing that we're going to dig into is a terrible ideology that has destroyed so many marriages, so many relationships, so many friendships, so many, you name it. And that is egalitarianism. Egalitarianism has become a huge problem in Christianity and churches across America today. And egalitarianism among the sexes, particularly. And what this basically teaches is that men and women are the same, right? We are equal. And the gender roles that we have are socio-constructed, meaning that women have been forced into these gender roles over the course of an oppressive patriarchal society, and women need to be set free from that. Men have been forced into these gender roles from a hierarchical patriarchal society, and that needs to be torn down, because basically men and women are the same. As a matter of fact, in the last administration, Joe Biden stood up and gave a speech where he said that. He said, there's nothing that a man can do that a woman can't do. And by default, there's nothing, obviously, from his statement, nothing that a woman can do that a man can't do. This, of course, is not true. It is 100% and completely false, because there are things that females can do that men can't do, and there are things that males can do that females can't do. Egalitarianism denies the biological differences between men and women. And most people think, oh, that's just a reference to the capacity to have children or make children, the sexual genitalia. No, it doesn't. The biological difference of a woman and a man is at every level of your entire physiology. It's not just that you can, carry babies or, make eggs or produce sperm and inseminate women. It is so far beyond the neurology of how a male brain operates as opposed to a female brain is completely different. Your entire biological makeup, your hormones, your chemistry, everything, your DNA is different. It is not the same. And egalitarianism is a horrible ideology, because what it does is it diminishes the unique value of males, and it robs society of the opportunity to help them discover authentic masculinity. Number two, it robs women of their value, and it puts so much pressure on them that they live miserable lives. Is that salty? Absolutely. But it's true. It is so true. So we're going to deal with egalitarianism. We're going to deal with another ideology that has cropped up recently, and that's called progressive Christianity. And don't get me started on that one. That one's going to be, we might spend weeks on that. Another one is Gnosticism. A lot of people don't understand the philosophical influence of Gnostic thinking as a framework, but it's everywhere. And it has really crept into the church. Now, why do I want to bring this up? Well, because I want people who are in the church, preachers and teachers and theologians and scholars, to realize that in order for this theology and doctrine and for the church to be more effective, it has to understand the influence of Gnosticism and what it does. And primarily, you need to do this if you want to win people to Christ. One of the primary reasons why Christianity is losing the culture war, it's not what you think. It's not because of politics. It's not because of systematic theology. The primary reason is because we don't understand the framework of Gnosticism and how it's influenced thinking today in the church. Okay. Another thing that we're going to have to dig into is hedonism. And that is the desire for the pursuit of self-fulfillment above all else. We're going to talk economic ideologies that are devastating, like socialism and communism. How come this ideology is so devastating, not only to societies, but to you as an individual, what it actually takes away from you. This is probably the most controversial one of all. But it's important to understand, and we're going to dig into it. And I think what we need to do is do this at the beginning of the year, because it's so controversial, and that is Islam. We're going to have to study Islamic ideology. No one wants to face the simple fact, that the Islamic religion is a philosophy of human governance, an economic system of development, and a family structure. Islam is a social contract built on a frame of reference. And this frame of reference is antithetical to Western civilization core values. And it is antithetical to those values because it is antithetical to Christianity. All right? It is absolutely unequivocally antithetical to Christianity. I have had people come to me and argue with me about the coexist bumper sticker. And the coexist argument is a complete and utter failure. It is the equivalent of a human being inviting cancer into their body with the belief that their body is designed to get along or be at peace with it. I mean, the modern secularist today, secularism, another ideology we'll dig into later, the modern secularist thinks it's possible to be pluralistic in all things. Oh, well, we can have all these ideologies, all live together and all get along. It's not a problem. But this is arrogance beyond belief. Western Europe has discovered this is not possible. They brought in massive immigration of Muslims into their country, and they found that they don't assimilate. They don't. And the reason why is because Islam is a philosophy of a social contract, and they are remaining faithful to their social contract, and it's antithetical to Christianity, and it's antithetical to Western civilization core values. So we're going to dig into that quite a bit if you want to know more about that. So today I just wanted to do kind of like an overview of all the different things, kind of to whet your appetite of what's coming. If you think that what is happening here on the Salty Pastor, and if it's blessing you and helping you grow in your faith, then I would ask that you help support the Salty Pastor podcast. Help grow the Salty Pastor universe. You can do that very easily by going to our YouTube channel, The Salty Pastor, and you can like and subscribe. If you click on the bell, anytime a new podcast on video drops, bing, it'll send you a notification. Another way you can do that is go to our website real quick, thesaltypastor.com, and you can click on the donate button and become a regular donor. Every monthly donation that you make on a regular basis helps this ministry grow. I'd love for you to be a part of it. I just really would welcome your support. Thank you to all of you who've already started doing that. It's just a beginning, and I hope and pray that this continues to grow in order to help you grow in your faith and think for yourself and realize you don't need to be an elite to figure out your life. You just need to understand what you believe and why you believe it. Think for yourself, make your own decisions, and you're going to find you're just fine. So remember, Salty Pastor signing off. Always think for yourself.